Yeah, and so my role as part of the Welcoming Communities Manager and as the workforce program manager here for many years now is to really help support employers and job seekers succeeding in the workforce, as we always have, but especially and particularly with the lens on supporting an international and a more diverse workforce. And so, as Casey mentioned, we've been doing quite a bit of research around what that looks like and the kind of support and resources that employers can invest in, that will be made available to employers, and really what that looks like. But I'll start with some basics.
I'm so sorry, can't be on camera today.
Yeah, and so what I'm going to do is provide a brief overview of why the BDCC got involved in supporting immigrants, refugees, asylees. And it's largely through our Welcoming Communities project. And it's really a workforce-driven and community vibrancy-driven approach to welcoming more folks into our community. This is just a brief history of the work we've been doing. A lot of you are familiar with our high school career programs, the career expos we used to run, before COVID, young professionals group, with which Casey will talk a bit about later. These have been focused on folks who are here now and supporting them in the workforce. And then over the years, we've really recognized the need for additional folks and a more diverse population to support our workforce goals. And so we initially partnered and continue to partner with the Community Asylum Seekers Project. And Dora's here. I'll give her a shout out in a few minutes, but she's the case manager with the Community Asylum Seekers Project. And so in learning from the experience of asylum seekers in our community and their work, and then partnering with the Ethiopian Community Development Council, which is the refugee resettlement organization coming to Brattleboro, we've really progressed in the amount of folks that we can welcome into our community and that support them. So this is just, again, a short overview, supporting and retaining folks who are here now and that diversity of folks, ensuring that foreign worker populations have a support system and resources. What new systems and opportunities do we have to scale? Welcoming a refugee resettlement organization will certainly scale our efforts in bringing new folks here. And then most importantly, with this office opening and with the crisis that's happening in Afghanistan, Brattleboro is now slated to have between 100 and 175 individuals settling here in our community in the next 18 months. And who those folks are broadly is what I'll touch on next. And you'll hear a lot of different words and ways to describe different folks based on how they've arrived in the United States and what kind of status they have. And I just want to briefly talk about this. So there's just a shared understanding, because in some ways this is important, and in some ways it won't be important for you as employers. And just first and foremost, recognizing that all of these different folks are seeking refuge outside of their home country because of a variety of reasons, but often related to violence or persecution or environmental disaster like famine and other things. But so there are three populations of folks that will be that you're likely to encounter if you haven't encountered already in your work. The refugees, and I'll use refugee with a capital R, because again, all of these folks are refugees in the definition of the word of seeking refuge outside of their country. But a formal refugee is supported through the Office of Refugee Resettlement. This is a formal program that is delivered again by a national organization That's the Ethiopian Community Development Council. That for us, they have an office in Brattleboro, and they're running the refugee program. And so there are resources and status that comes with being a refugee. These folks were spent time outside of the United States. That's where their vetting process began, likely in a refugee camp. They are approved, vetted, and then through the Department of State and Homeland Security are then brought to the United States as a refugee. These folks arrive with permanent residency. They have workers' permits, they have driver's licenses, and they have federal access to federal benefits. So in many ways, they, from a worker standpoint, they have no status-oriented barriers to working. These folks are eligible to work immediately upon arrival. The next category is a really poorly named category, and they're called parolees or humanitarian parolees. And this is the Afghan population that we're seeing that had to flee Afghanistan in a fast way. And so this is a separate designated status. It's very similar to refugees in some ways, and it's also similar to asylees. But these folks, again, arrive with work permits. They'll have driver's licenses and access to federal benefits. But the primary difference is that they aren't necessarily granted permanent residency, and they need to follow the legal asylum seeking process, essentially, and they start that once they arrive. And that can be really timely, or it can take quite a bit of time for that to happen. But they are supported through federal support, a federal program that, again, the Ethiopian Community Development Council will run. And so the Ethiopian Community Development Council, again, serves not just Ethiopians, refugees in general, and the Afghan humanitarian parolees. And that one office runs the two programs. So you may be working with the same case manager for a humanitarian parolee from Afghanistan or from a refugee from a different country. And to make things even more confusing, there may be a refugee from Afghanistan who isn't a humanitarian parolee. But again, that's less important from your end. Asylum seekers are slightly different. And they, upon arrival in the United States, don't necessarily have access to any of the things that we've mentioned above. Asylum seekers start the process from within the United States and are required to seek employment authorization, which can take some time. And that happens concurrently with their asylum claim. And so it's possible that, and it's often the case that the asylum claim takes a very long time, years and years. And so after they filed for asylum, they have to wait a certain period of time, and then they can get work authorization. And so, however, they are legally allowed to work once they have that work authorization. Those folks are supported by CASP, the Community Asylum Seekers Project. Well, I'll touch on that in just a moment. We have asylees in our community already in our workplaces, and CASP is doing great work in supporting them for years now. And so I think it's a population we don't speak as much about, but are here and part of our community already. Just from the employer perspective, and one of the reasons why some of this information isn't necessary for you to understand is because no matter what, you will never be referred a candidate who isn't fully authorized to work, not from the case managers nor from anyone else, because to break labor law while you're going through the asylum seeking process or you're looking for permanent residency, you don't want to be breaking the law at that time. And so there, it doesn't benefit the employer nor the job seeker to work if they are not authorized to work. And so this is, again, one reason why the differences that you'd like to learn about these different populations, we're more than happy to. But in general, folks who are coming into your door looking for work, if referred to by any of these organizations, will be fully authorized to work. And so what I've spent the last many months, and most specifically this past week in person visiting and researching, is how do you become an employer of choice for New Vermonters? For refugees and humanitarian parolees, these folks must accept the first job offer they get, if they're able to do it. And yet we know that always doesn't work out. And so our goal is to have employers work to be an employer of choice. And so that whether it's their first job turns into their career, or that there's a skill level of job that you hope to fill with folks who you are confident and comfortable training. It's really and the reason why we call it an employer of choice is because that's the goal as an employer, that you can adopt if you want to engage with this workforce population. Again, this could be up to 175 folks the first year, which would be a high number. But this is a significant, recruitment and hiring opportunity of folks who are eager and willing to work. And so, based on some interviews and tours with Rhino Foods and Twin Craft Skincare, two organizations up in Chittenden County, both of these organizations are the leading employers of New Vermonters in the state. Rhino Foods makes cookie dough, and they're a food manufacturer, so familiar with a lot of folks what they make. And the other one is a soap and skincare products manufacturer. So we have both durable and non-durable goods manufacturing, and the folks that they employ have a wide variety of jobs there. And so what I'm going to talk about today isn't workplace inclusivity and equity from a diversity and inclusion standpoint, from that cultural standpoint. That we have a program that we'll be launching soon that will talk a lot more about the culture. We really want to focus now, because culture will take years to develop, and that's something we know. What we're focusing on more immediately are the tools and best practices to support these folks on their first weeks and months on the job and longer term. Because you can't wait years for something to change. We know these folks will need to be hired within the first 90 days. The goal is for these folks to be hired within the 90 days of arrival. And so these are, just the four big aspects that we're going to be diving into, and I'll provide some examples of each. Feel free to raise your hand to ask questions. Anything you'd like to learn more about as I go through this, just let me know. So the first, again, I'll say our partners and roles. I've mentioned the Ethiopian Community Development Council. They will be doing initial intake of folks. And Joe Wea, who's their director, unfortunately isn't available today, but more importantly, they're hiring case managers now. So this is a new office that's opened. And so eventually there will be case managers associated with both their humanitarian parolees, the Afghans, and traditional refugees. We also have CASP, and Dora is here on the call. If you want to give a wave, Dora. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself or say a few words, or yeah.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm Dora Urujeni, and I work with CASP since 2019. This is my third year. Yeah, I'm so happy to be part of this meeting because, and I love how you call this project Welcoming Communities. Yeah, that's what really Vermont, would like to do. Yeah, so I'm happy for any question. I work with the asylee, mostly from the Southern America, Mexico, Honduras, Cuba. Yeah, now we have some African as well from Ghana, Rwanda. Yeah, for now we have like 15 people. So I'm happy to answer any question, any clarification about these folks we work with. And thank you, Alex, for doing this. It's such a great work. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dora.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and some of you have either have worked with Dora or will soon be working with Dora. And the way, we have worked together often is I'll help from the employer side organize, whether it's an interview or tours, sharing job descriptions. And Dora is the one who supports the employees in getting ready for those opportunities and working on translation stuff. And so it's been really great partnership, and the two halves of what a successful placement make, and that's really the relationship we'll be having with all case managers moving forward. And so again, and I'm Alex, and this will be my role moving forward. And so based on your needs and a bit, and what you're looking to do as an employer, my role is to support you in meeting those goals and working as a liaison between these organizations. All right, and so to dive right in, so first and foremost, the reason why we led with the roles and the people is because when in doubt, reach out to the case managers who are assigned to the people you're working with. If you have any questions or concerns, but I know that the topmost concern, especially in both manufacturing environments, healthcare environments, is and all, in all effective teamwork, is communication, but especially safety and quality, I know, are the utmost priorities and concerns of folks. And so effective communication and clear communication is really the focus for the first many months of employment and pre-employment for these individuals. And I have an FAQ sheet that I'll send out. I'll attach in just a second. I don't know what the chat, where that went. Anyways, I'll send that out. It'll have this information and who to call more specifically. But Vermont Adult Learning is located on Putney Road, and they offer free English language learning classes, GED completion classes, math and literacy. And so from the long-term communication standpoint, really engaging with them is valuable. It's something we've seen across the state. Some employers, the ones that we mentioned earlier, Rhino Foods and Twincraft, they bring in Vermont Adult Learning for a couple hours every week into the workplace to train these, to work on this with these folks. What my role is to make sure that if that's something you would want to do as an employer, then we could help, logistics. If multiple employers wanted to send all of their employees to a class in the middle of the day together, those are logistics I can help sort out. But the benefit of that is, for the cost of someone's hourly wage, so that would be, $30 or $40 a week, they would have free language learning classes. And so that's an opportunity. Instead of contracting language learning internally, you can help folks and help your employees access that longer term. Another thing I was really surprised by, which were these, very large and successful companies in Chittenden County. When I asked, so how do you do all of your translation of your documents? They said Google Translate. And so I think, one of the biggest things I want to share is that this is not as difficult as it can sometimes feel. Communication challenges are stressful and can be intimidating, and you never want to hurt anyone's feelings or be disrespectful. But intention is the number one thing you can do. As long as you're trying and you're using what's available to you, even if it's Google Translate, that's what we've seen a lot of folks do, and that's okay. And so that's really where copy and pasting a paragraph at a time of an SOP into Google Translate can be enough. There are also fee-for-service document and live and video translation interpretation services. So that's where, if you have a lot of documents and you need them translated really quickly and you don't have the internal time capacity to do that, you can contract with a company and send all of that information out, and they will get it back to you within a certain, a few days for a cost, fully translated. Links and information of the ones that we've heard people use, again, will be in an FAQ sheet that I'll send to you folks in just a minute. The same is with live and video services. From what I've heard, it's a yearly fee to be a part of this service, and then they charge a certain rate per minute or hour of translation, and that would usually be if you have a big staff meeting. You may want simultaneous translation, for that. And so the other thing is that interpreters who work either for ECDC or CASP may be available at no or low cost for this early portion of onboarding, or even until at least a hire is made. So that part of our responsibility in supporting these folks is making sure that that they have the support in navigating job seeking. And so really just making sure there's an interpreter for a tour, for the interview process, to go over job responsibilities before an offer or a hire is made. Those services will often be at no cost to the employer. Onboarding is also a time when we'll focus as many of the available resources we have. But what we often have heard across the state and elsewhere is that beyond 90 days, beyond that initial onboarding, additional interpretation or translation in real time is fee for service, whether you're working with the Refugee Resettlement Office. So that's what happens in Chittenden County. After a certain period of time, they do start charging for interpretation services, or again, these online or other translation services. And the last I'll say is signage is cheap and everlasting. I know things change, so it's not everlasting, but the cheap part helps with that. The second topic I wanted to talk about, especially for HR people, is that how do you create cultural flexibility that meets the needs of a diverse population without creating special and different policies for different groups of people. And so I heard of some really creative wellness policies, and it's creating space for people to celebrate different holidays and different cultures, and making sure that you're recognizing not just the new people, but the existing people. So Twin Craft Skincare has holiday parties that represent the cultures and communities that are new to them, as part of wellness, and they subsidize hunting and fishing licenses for the Vermonters who that's part of their cultural background. And so that cuts both ways, and being creative about that. Wellness spaces, some folks have created spaces like break rooms, or places to do yoga or lactation suites or other things like this. Both of these companies had space dedicated for prayer, where someone who practices Islam can lay out their mat and pray the required amount of times a day. It doesn't need to be a multi-million-dollar break room. It can just be a space that you've made available and that is accessible to these folks when they need it, to the best of your ability. And again, intention's important. Culturally agnostic benefits and perks. So the idea of floating holidays made a lot of sense to me, because it doesn't change the number of holidays you give any different employees. It's not, oh, well, these folks celebrate more holidays a year, so they get more vacation days. But allowing holiday days to float so that it's not necessarily associated with one person's holiday or religion and another. It's that, everyone has three, holiday, floating holidays, and you pick the three most important religious or, celebrations to you. If you have 6 religious celebrations a year, we may not be able to accommodate that, but everyone can at least use them how they feel that they need best. In terms of training and onboarding, looking at the flexibility of how you've done this in the past, and are there ways that you can repackage this that is somewhat more flexible, but also requires the same amount of time and focus. And so the two things that I really thought were interesting were Having new employees shadowing existing employees and learning from a coworker, whether they speak the same language or not. Ideally, as folks begin to succeed and you have, Pashto speakers on the floor really doing well in their jobs, you'll begin including them in this shadow training. And so then you can actually start building cohorts of knowledge within these folks who they may not have an excellent understanding of the English language yet, but as soon as someone has an excellent understanding of their job functions, they can begin communicating that in their native language with a new employee. And cohort-based training builds a team on your shop floor and also can help retention longer term. It also will save money maybe on translation. And so if we have limited amount of translation for onboarding, we may wait until there's 5 folks who are ready to start and then do a cohort or a boot camp crash course model, whatever you want to call it, to make sure folks can be trained, they hear everything they need to hear, and you don't need to spend too much money on an in-person interpreter, if at all. And the last thing that you'll be hearing more about soon is an income advance program that some of you may be familiar with. And so one thing to remember is some of these folks don't have credit. They may be completely unbanked. And so the idea of you have a flat tire and you need to find an alternative way to get to work, solving that problem is compounded in many ways for some of these folks. And so this income advance program is championed and run in Chittenden County with those 2 employers. And essentially what it does is a bank, a local bank, and we know that Brattleboro Savings and Loan is interested, if not committed to being a part of this, is that they can provide an emergency loan that is essentially based on the person's wage. And so that the bank gives out a loan and then that loan is repaid as a deduction from their wages. And so what that does is that it takes you as the HR person out of the responsibility of having to solve a financial burden that is preventing this person from working. So there, no one would need to ask you for, hey, I need, next week's wages now. That, is something that, as HR folks is really difficult to stomach, understandably. And this income advance program is available to anyone. And so this is, again, where it's a flexibility that is both equitable to anyone who needs it, and it doesn't have HR folks saying, well, we can't give this to everyone, so who do we give it to? And so it removes that concern. And again, it's garnered through paychecks, and it really helps these folks get banked and develop credit. And there will be presentations more specific about this coming up, but this is just a little tool that we know has been successful. So again, what I want to start with culture, and in a very broad sense. We're not going to get in too much into diversity, equity, inclusion training at the cultural understanding level. This is much more about communicating existing culture in a way that's inclusive of other folks. And I'll focus here predominantly on culture and of safety and quality are the 2 examples that are really important. But also the values that you folks have. I think most of your organizations have some mission statement, value statement that you see in the lobby. Is that shared throughout the entire workplace, where folks who are maybe new will feel more welcomed when they see it regularly? And so I'm going to go through a few of these examples. But leadership is really, really important. And then the last piece, again, is welcoming workplaces, which is more of that equity and inclusion work. There'll be a separate training that we're helping put on and leading on that. It came out of the Diverse Workforce Development Group, which some of you folks are members of. And so the goal for this training is to expand that work more regionally and in a way that more employers can participate. But one thing is important, and this is something, it was a quote from the head of HR at Twincraft, and it was that the culture of your company is defined by the worst behavior tolerated by the most senior person. And just to remember that what we as leaders in our workplaces allow to happen impacts our culture a lot more than how frequently we put up signs and have staff meetings. You need both, and I'll get to that in a second. But most importantly, culture seems like a very difficult and complicated thing to think about. And my number one realization is it's no more complicated than the way you already define your culture of safety and quality, which is signage. And I know it sounds silly, but when you walk around most workplaces, whether it's operating machinery safely, putting on PPE correctly, how the processes and procedures, there's signage everywhere. And so, and I'll show some examples of what, how that can impact and how easy it is to do in some ways. So this is, again, the mission statement and value statement. A lot of you folks have this. This is the big one in the lobby. I think we're familiar with this. What I was excited to see is these less attractive ones. I mean, everyone knows what these things are, hanging up on the shop floor, right? Most workplaces have a million different little things that you hang up on the shop floor for quality, for time management, for safety. You can include those things, your vision and your mission and value statements there as well. Will people be reading them all the time? No, but if they're taking a break or it catches their eye, it's a reminder of the good work you've already put in and the culture that you're trying to create. This is another thing that is a good example of an easy way to recognize and celebrate the diversity of your workplace is to show how diverse it is already. And so it's a little hard to see, but you'll see some little red dots, particularly around Nepal. So this employer in Chittenden County has Nepalese and Bhutanese refugees. And so if you look really closely, right in in China and the highlands of Tibet and Nepal and Bhutan, you see a ton of little red dots. And then over here in New England, you'll see another ton of little red dots here and there. And it's just a good way to represent the diversity of your team and to celebrate it, and to have someone when they come and they're the first person from their community to put that, to claim that ground is important also. But it's not all warm and fuzzy, right? You need to ensure the safety and quality of your products, or if in the healthcare industry, the safety and quality of the care that you're delivering. Visuals help, and these posters were not expensive. This wasn't a significant, investment in terms of a learning tool or signage to have around the workplace, but it's pretty straightforward. How do we communicate quality to our employees? Show them what bad looks like and show them what good looks like, and then translate that for them. And so again, this is what I think is a straightforward example of it's not as hard or complicated as it might feel, and that there are ways to do this in not just in the teaching way, not just during when you have a translator on site. And this is kind of what I said when signage is everlasting, is that these are examples, and this is a learning thing. This is a resource that the folks who are standing directly in front of this machine can look at daily, and it doesn't require additional training or guidance necessarily. It's there for them to see. And so this is one of the last pictures I have, and so this is the beautiful very nice, I'm sure very expensive break room that they have at Rhino Foods. The least expensive part of the entire room was painting on all of these different languages. And I think that's something that, to remind folks, again, you have some of your employees are definitely artists and would be happy to do this somewhere. You see delicious things done right. Most of you folks will have a tagline. Every time a new employee who comes to speak a different language, find a high school student who likes to spray paint and have them make a stencil. So again, the cheapest thing in some ways are these little things about translating not very complex parts, the most complex things like onboarding and safety trainings. That's where you'll need those translators. But from a cultural standpoint, from communicating what's important to your company every day, that is low-hanging fruit that we can help you get creative to buy and to find. And another great example I'll say is the sound of a forklift means the same in every language, right? And I think those yellow lines that you're not supposed to leave, or you need to be cautious of when you're in a less safe or a more dangerous part of the workplace. Many of that signage is universal. And so a lot of our concerns around safety are well-founded, but I think it's being confident that if you really try and you're really earnest in how you communicate and you're using the resources available, safety and quality can maintain a priority. And so this is the last slide I have, and it's really perfect as the enemy of good. Again, you'll have, there will be a lot of resources made available to you folks. I'll post this in the chat. Oh wait, I can do it now. I'll post the link with a bit more information in the chat. It's a little FAQ we put together. And I'll say that Rhino Foods, again, in the 90s, decided they wanted to be the best employer for refugees in the state. And one of their shift managers just left to move to Pennsylvania because that person has family in Pennsylvania. And we know the way that communities develop in our country is where folks find success, they join their families and they build that community. And so that is something that we're trying to build here. That wouldn't it be great if next time someone's family from Pennsylvania moves to Brattleboro because we've done everything we can to support these communities. And then all of a sudden, we're not reliant only on resettlement programs, we're reliant on the opportunities we offer. Notably, and this is why, I think to reiterate that, why some of these tactics are important is that these folks are doing better with the workforce crisis than others. It's not a gimmick. It is an intentional and really beneficial investment they've made. Twincraft Skincare hired 150 people since COVID. So as folks were being laid off from service jobs and tourism jobs and all sorts, Twincraft was really intentionally positioning themselves to capture those folks. And we know that COVID impacted people of color and women, more drastically than others. And so a lot of their recruitment and support strategies made themselves an employer of choice when a crisis hit. Intention and attention is really important. If you're trying and you're paying attention, you'll see the easy things and it'll be easier than because the goodwill is there and the folks you're working with will see that. Be iterative but committed is my way of saying you will fail. We'll all fail. Things go wrong all the time. When I was in the refugee resettlement office in Chittenden County, there's a big sign that they have that says, "Don't forget to give 15 days notice if you're quitting a job." Right? We're not pretending that these folks won't have difficulties in the workplace like any other employees, that they have unique barriers, perhaps. But if you're committed to trying to invest in these basic areas and these resources, then it will be recognized and you'll more likely to retain folks and support them. And then last but not least, communicating effectively with case managers is as important with communicating with employees directly, because and I say this in the FAQ, is that if there's a problem, it could either be a very simple miscommunication, like Google Translate didn't see the word "don't do blank" and it just says "do blank," and that could be a cause, or it could be a deeper cultural education opportunity. and that, you know, things like being on time and the importance of American culture or the way American workplace culture is, there may be more support that, again, isn't the responsibility of an HR person to deliver, that our case managers and our workforce team can do. And so, again, this was a broad overview of some of the best practices that you folks can start thinking about. There are, in some of the, in the FAQ, there are resources you can explore. If you want, if you're interested in having some documents translated by ASTA USA, I've been in touch with them, and they're giving us a discount essentially because of we're working together as a region and for a bulk you know, discount. So if you are interested in using that service, maybe just try it out and send a document or two. Let me know, and I'll give you the email of the person we've been working with. And you know, they'll get it around quickly. And if it works, you know, I'd love to hear, because again, this is new to a lot of us, and we know it works for some folks in Chittenden County, but my job is to make sure the tools available to you all are working here in our region. So that was a lot of me talking, but so I'd love to hear a few more, any questions, comments, concerns. Dora.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for such a good presentation. Mine is like adding on what you have said about language challenging. So I had a suggestion. So our asylum seeker attend Vermont English class at Vermont Adult Learning, but once they get a job, depend on the schedule, and they want to work really full-time, like 40 hours or more, and then they drop off the English class. Will it be advisable for like employers to have like 1 hour during their work schedule? And then we can work on providing either a volunteer who's gonna come over for 1 hour, and we can work on it. If really that's an option, that will be really helping, so that the person who's like tutoring or giving them like this hour English class can even focus more on what they do on a daily basis in their workplace.
Yep.
So
yeah,
that's one thing. Yeah. My second comment was on, I don't know if, yeah, we are having really a big challenge in terms of immigration. So now, yeah, as Alex said, asylee, they work so hard to get work permit, which takes longer. When you are applying for work permit for the first time, it takes like 10 to 12 months. Now, another second challenge has been even renewing the work permit is another challenge that just recently came in. So even renewing it is taking really longer. So it just to be understandable. So when an asylee has applied for his work permit, they get a notice from USCIS, and that notice really can serve for the transition from when the new, employee authorization comes. So I know that some of the employers are not, oh, this is not an official document. Yes, it is, and it can serve up to 6 months. So it's just, understanding really the immigration system is really very challenging for asylees now. But these folks are really very committed and willing really to perform and give all they can to make happy their employers.
And I think that's a great point. Thank you, Dora, for around especially documentation. And that's something that, again, a case manager will always be able to explain to you that this is fine, it's not a concern. And also around the English classes, it's, emphasizing that these folks will often accept as many hours as you're willing to give them for work. But if you want them to grow in terms of their language learning skills with the job responsibilities that they're becoming more adept at, then finding a way to have them be compensated for that time is going to be the best way to do that, because these folks often have family back in their home country or elsewhere that they're sending part of their paychecks home to. And so every dollar does count for these folks. And so if they're required to either work a couple hours or take another shift or go to English class, they will always choose to work, I think, or more often than not. And so, but as an employer, if you want folks who can move up the ladder, who can accept more responsibility, who can be cross-trained, who can be more valuable, in your workplace, giving these folks time and space and compensation to improve their English language skills will be an investment that pays off as an employer. And that's why we've seen other employers hire classes and be on site. It's not an expectation for you all, but if you're willing to explore what that would look like, the logistics of doing that is something that we're here to help you do. And it would be that's a great example of the role that we're all playing. So any other questions? There's gonna be a lot more discussion of this. We're now thinking of convening a statewide group of employers so that you can hear directly from these folks throughout the state. But I think that this is a great place to start exploring these resources, maybe preparing some HR and operations folks, and just to keep this conversation open.
Alex, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was wondering, just outside of the workplace, in terms of general community support, would it be appropriate for an employer to do a food drive or a clothing drive for everyone arriving? I'm thinking about, for example, the transition between Afghanistan's climate and Vermont, and they might not have winter coats or boots. How do you think about the appropriateness of our company or any company sponsoring something like that?
That would be fantastic. I think that that would be fantastic. And what we can do is provide a way to sign up to do that. There's going to be a lot more information on how to volunteer and donate and support. They're called co-sponsorship groups. I can try and find the link shortly. I think if you go to casvt.org/refugees, I'm going to see, hopefully this works.
Yeah, and I think, Alex, what we'll do is make sure that we'll send out an email to everyone that's got the FAQ, the PowerPoint, the recording of this meeting, as well as that co-sponsorship information. So we'll make sure that we'll inundate you with plenty of homework to peruse at your leisure.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and lastly, refugees and asylees aren't the only new folks we want to be welcoming into our community. And Casey is going to wrap up the call with more information about new employees and supporting folks in general in the workplace.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Really, really great information. I mean, it's the sort of thing where a lot of these points that you brought up in your presentation are not just solely applicable to the refugees and the asylum seekers, right? It's these kinds of workplace practices will benefit everyone that you bring on. And so I think it is really important to have those kinds of conversations, and then let that be a seed that germinates and gets you into some new ways of thinking. So really great information. I am going to share super briefly as a reminder, mostly about the Young Professionals Organization and the Southern Vermont Welcome Wagon Project. You probably heard about them, but just to refresh as a resource for new and current employees. So I'm going to just share my screen here real quick. So I'll switch over to the Welcome Wagon. And so this is a project that we run over here. We have a chapter for Southern Vermont. It's designed to connect newcomers to the area with enthusiastic locals. And so it can be a tool not only to have your new employees be connected into the community and get those roots and find some of those community supports that we all know are so important to increasing your retention, but also encouraging your employees to participate as hosts as a way for your other sort of your veterans in your organization to be able to kind of give back as well. And I think that, being able to create those almost like extracurricular relationships and connections can be a really powerful tool. It's pretty straightforward. People can sign up to participate. They fill in a little bit of information about themselves. Same thing with the hosts. We send a newsletter out. We do a lot of email connections, and it sort of creates this almost grassroots network that allows people to engage more deeply in their communities. So in that same vein, but this is a program for not just for newcomers, but for people who've been with your organization for a while. We've also got the Young Professionals organization. So that is, again, the Young Professionals, right? It has a lot of all the connotations, but we want to make sure that it's really broadly open and accessible and inclusive to a wide variety. You don't need to be a white collar office worker. And we encourage actually everyone to come out. So we've had a lot of interesting events, getting young professionals with families, young kids to come out and do a circus class recently at NECA was really fun. Horror movies, game nights, we have professional development events, networking opportunities. And so again, it's just another way to encourage the young people in your community to form those roots, form those connections, because they can have a good job, but if they don't have friends in the community and those roots, it's hard to build a life that is sustainable. So those are just a quick overview of some tools, some extra resources available. I will send out some information along with all of these great refugee resources following our meeting. So, but wanted to just kind of touch on that as a brief refresher. So happy to open, take.
That was very helpful, Casey. What defines a young professional, just so we refer the right people at our organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right, in Vermont, young is relative. So 20 something to 40 something is kind of our window that we typically look at. And then professional is anyone who wants to meet people and get involved. So
thank you. This is wonderful.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question.
Great.
Unless we have any more questions, I'll kind of put a bow on this, or if Alex has any last points that he wants to bring up.
No, thanks for being here and for starting to think about this. And our goal is to make sure that our entire community and economy benefits from new folks coming to our community. And so how we all partner and move forward together on this is, I think, really exciting. And after years of being asked for more employees, I think we're in a really great place to start seeing what that actually looks like. And more people in our community is something I think a lot of us have been waiting for a while. So hopefully it'll be easier and an easy experience moving forward.
Thank you. All right, everyone, thanks so much for coming. We'll leave on that high note, and I hope everyone has a really great rest of your Friday and enjoy your weekend.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.